Okay guys, this is the fourth and final video in this series, and this is going to pull the whole thing together, and it's going to basically it's going to make the game now. So we're going to do what we call our main loop, and it's going to be our loop that goes through the game and it controls everything that's happening. Okay, so it's actually quite a long piece of code we're going to look, but we'll talk it through it and we'll kind of see how we get on from here. So we're going to define main. We are going to first of all, and we are going to first of all initialize Pygame, and then we are going to set our FPS. So you can change this if you want. 60 FPS I found is quite smooth on my computer, but if you want things moving faster, you can up it. If you need things moving slower, you can move it down from here. We're going to get a clock, which is equal to Pygame.time.clock. Okay, so that's going to, as a function that Pygame has, that actually has a little clock there, and it's going to allow us to sort of tick through and create 60 frames per second. We're going to say a starting speed, so I'm going to start mine at 1, but if you want yours to be more difficult, you can start them at a higher speed. We're going to set an initial score, so that's going to be 0. We're going to set a weight to 0 as well, and we're going to set an image reset to 0 as well. So the weight and the image reset, we are going to look at those in more detail as we get into this next chunk of code. So we're going to actually, just to make things a little bit easier for us, we're now going to program some colors. So these are just RGB colors, and we're going to use these with our font. When we're drawing our font. So black is 000, red is 25500, and green is 02550, and then white is going to be 255, 255, 255. Okay, so those are some colors, and we're also going to do a color increment value. Okay, so this is going to be, as you saw in my video at the beginning, when the background sort of slowly faded, this is going to be the value we slowly change up to make that fade. Okay, and that's going to kind of just make our background a little bit more dynamic. So our color ink value is going to set to 0, and it's going to go up. Next thing we want to do is we want to load in our fonts. So we need to obviously draw the score and stuff like that. So we need to load in the font in order to do that. So we're going to do font equals Pygame dot font, and we're going to pull from the system font, and that is Verdana, and it is going to be, this first one's going to be 60 as a font size. And then small font, so this is another one I'm just making here, so small font, so a small version of that is going to be exactly the same, but you guessed it, the font size is going to be smaller. And then we are actually going to create the piece of text for our game over. So game over is going to be small, it's going to be written in small font, and it is going to be, we're going to render that, dot render, and we're going to say we want game over to be displayed. We want it to be anti-aliased. So anti-aliasing is where, you know, if you look at pixels and they're all jagged, anti-aliasing is what will kind of smooth that off for you. So if we set that to true, that puts anti-aliasing on. It's going to smooth out those fonts for us. If we set that to false, it displays the pixels as they are, okay, without any anti-aliasing. And then a color, so black, so as we programmed earlier, so we don't have to do all the zeros and all the rest of it. So there's our colors and our fonts done. Next thing we need to do for our main loop is the window itself. So we're going to do that by just doing a screen width. And we're going to set our screen width to 500 and screen height and we're going to equals that to 600. So you can play around with these, and because the way we've programmed it, it should always adjust and put more aliens on or less aliens on, but your alien should always be there and your player should always be in the middle of the screen. So have a play around with it, but it should always update. And then on that window we are going to load our background image, which is going to be pygame.image.load background image .png. Ooh. And then we're going to create our display surface, and that is going to be equal to pygame.display.set mode screen width screen height. So create our display surface, and it's going to be whatever. So this is going to be the window basically. It's going to be the width by the height there that we've actually put in. And then we're going to just set a little bit at the top. So our caption at the top in our little bar. So we're going to set to Space Invaders. So pygame.display.set_caption. And you can put anything you want in here. Just do Space Invaders. Although I suppose we should do because that's copyrighted. So Space Invaders 2 or something. And then we are going to just do a couple more attributes, not to do with the window. So we're going to do actually a couple of events. So we're going to do a new event called increase speed. So this is actually what drives the aliens to move faster across the screen, and that is going to be equal to pygame.userEvent +1. So we can basically, when we get into the loop in a minute, you'll see that we're constantly looking for events. So we're making a new event here called increase speed, and we're setting it to, we're saying it's a new user event, and basically we're going to keep adding 1. Okay, so and then in order to do this, in order to increment that, we then need to do this next bit. So we do pygame.time.set_timer increase_speed 3000 milliseconds or frames or something like that. This is the amount we're going to increase. So basically our timer here, every time this event gets triggered, we set our timer to increase the speed. Okay, we set it to increase, and you can play around with this number here. That's how much I thought was a good amount for them to actually get moving by. Oh, I missed a bracket. I think I've just got an extra bracket in there. Let's get rid of that extra bracket. There we go. So the next bit we're going to look at is actually setting the music. So playing music. So this next bit we already imported the mixer, but now we're going to initialize it. So mixer.init, then mixer.music.load. And I'm going to load this 8bit.mp3. I'll tell you where you can get that from. You can download that's royalty free. Then we're going to set a volume for that. So mixer.music.set_volume. And it's from 0 to 1, so 0.7 I thought was quite a good one. And then we're going to set it to play, so mixer.music.play. Play. And that's it, that's our music playing there. So next thing to do is we're going to initialize the background. The player, the bullet, and the enemies. So the background is going to be equal to our background class, and if we remember rightly, that takes a argument of display surface. So our background is going to generate, it's going to go to the background class, it's going to pass it display surface, it's going to go all the way up to the background class, it's going to do all this for us, and then it's going to draw the two backgrounds where we wanted them. The player is going to be equal to, and then our player class here, and if we remember, that takes a screen width and a screen height. So when this is called, it's going to go up to the player class, it's going to pass it the screen width and screen height, it's going to load the player PNG, it's going to make it a surface, it's going to put it where it needs to be, and it's going to keep on looking for this. Oh, it's not going to do that just yet, but we will then be able to use the looking for the left and the right signals to see if we've moved it left and right. We're going to make a list called the bullet list, which is going to keep track of all of our bullets. Then we are going to call our enemy spawner, which is going to create all of our enemies. Remember, our enemy spawner, once we call that up here, it actually calls the enemy class inside it and creates a list of all those enemies, all in those grid positions, ready to be drawn. So we don't actually need to call the enemy class because we're calling it in the enemy spawner. And then we are going to do something which is called making a group. So, and this is a kind of a Pygame kind of specific thing, something they've put in to make sort of managing groups of enemies easier. So, our enemy group, basically, we're going to basically make a new variable here called enemy group, and we're going to set it to the group class. Okay, and it means that we can look at that group. We will be able to in a minute, once we add all our enemies into this, we'll be able to look at that group of enemies and do stuff with them all at once. So we're going to add everybody into the enemy group now. So we're going to do for x in enemy spawner dot alien list. So for every position in the alien list which gets created, we're going to add each of those positions, each of those aliens, into the enemy group. So enemy group dot add x. Oh. Okay, so alien list is created in the spawner. So if we look here, alien list is empty at the beginning, and then as we go through, we keep appending all the aliens we make at the positions that we do with this X and Y, and then we put all of those aliens in this group so that we can manage that group all at one time. Right, now onto the actual function of the game. So we're going to do this. We're going to do while true. We want to be looking at the following events. So I said earlier that Pygame kind of works by looking at events. So we're going to look at a couple of different events. We're going to look at whether or not the person has quit and whether or not the increased speed has actually kind of come to pass. So for so we're going to look at so we're going to So we're going to use the get event to look at the events which are actually happening, and we're going to look for if the user has quit out of the game and if the increased speed event has actually been hit. I've just remembered actually, I explained that slightly incorrectly, this bit here. The increased speed every 3,000 seconds or milliseconds, I think it is, so it's for 30 seconds. Increased speed, we're going to add 1 to this increased speed, and then we will then be able to increase the speed of the whole game. You'll see what I'm saying in a second. So basically, this is just looking at every 3,000 milliseconds. Has 3,000 milliseconds passed? If it has, we're going to add 1 to this increased speed event. Okay, and we'll look at that in a second. Okay. So, well, we'll look at that now actually. So if event. So first of all, sorry, we need to actually get all of the events. So we're going to do for event in pygame.event.get. If the event.type is equal to increase speed, so if those 3000 milliseconds have passed, what we want to do is we want to take the speed of our aliens and we want to add 0.1 to it. Okay, you can make them faster if you want, it's up to you. So every time that increased speed event occurs, we add 0.1 to our aliens speed. We also need to be looking for the event for actually if they've clicked on the X at the top of the screen. So if event dot, oh, that should be Pygame there. If event dot type equals quit, so they've clicked on that big red X, we're going to do Pygame dot quit. So those are two main events that we're going to be looking out for. So the next one, the next piece that we're gonna actually look at is incrementing the background color all the way through. So if the color inc val is greater than 254, we are going to fill that display surface, or we're going to set the display surface dot fill to 00255. So we're just going to set it so it's nice and blue again, basically. So if our value for that is ever 255, we're going to reset it there. For everything else, we're going to do I think those need 2 brackets around them because that's a tuple. Color display surface dot fill 0, 0, and then this last one is going to be 0 plus whatever the color ink value is currently set to. Okay, so this basically just makes us makes that color increase constantly. And then color ink val is going to go up by 0.2 each frame. Okay, so this is just going to make that kind of background kind of slowly go blue. Okay, and then reset it as it's gone to blue. Okay then, so right, let's get into actually looking at drawing our display and their score and things like that. So we are going to update the background, background.update. So background, if we remember, had an update function, which is this one here, which actually moves those X and Y's by the move speed and then checks if they've gone off screen and resets them. So in our while loop, we want to be calling that every time to keep our background moving along the screen. And then we're going to do background.render, and we're going to say draw it to the display surface. And then that's our whole background done. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little comment here so we know this is all the background rendering. Now, so the next one here, once we've done our backgrounds, we want to now look at doing the same for our player. So this is going to be player.draw, and then we're going to say where do we want to draw it. We're going to just draw it to the display surface. and then we're going to call the player.move function to keep checking whether or not they've moved. So again, that takes the screen width and the screen height. And there's our player kind of drawn, and we're checking if we've moved that player as well. Next one, we are going to look at the displaying the score. So to display the score, we are going to do our score text, and that is going to equal small font dot render the word score plus str score true and white. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're drawing the word score, and then our number score, as it's incrementing, we want to keep on updating that. So what I'm saying is take the number score, cast it into a string, and then draw that string with the word score and draw it anti-aliased and draw it white. And then we're just going to say what position we want to actually draw that in. So we're going to do display surface dot blit, and we're going to say that score text needs to be in the top left corner. And that is that. Okay, so the next part of this is looking at the enemy group and determining what they're doing, are they all there, what position they need to move in, and that kind of stuff. So we're going to do the enemy group. So this first thing here is going to look at whether or not that enemy group is ever equal to 0. So if that enemy group is ever equal to 0, we need to repopulate it, refresh all the enemies so they go back to the top of the screen. So if the len of enemy group is ever the same as the number 0, we are going to create a new alien list, so enemy spawner dot alien list equals. In fact, I'm not sure why I would need to do that, because I create an alien list earlier, actually in the enemy spawner, but we'll leave it in for a second. Then we're going to call the enemy spawner function again, add them all in, and then add them all into the group again. So basically, this piece of code here, we're going to take that, we're going to fill up that. We're going to fill up that group again. So if I've ever not got any enemies in that list, I'm going to remake the group, and I'm going to call the spawner, and I'm going to add all of the enemies from that spawner back into my group there, and then I'm ready to go again. The next piece that I'm going to look at is we're going to look at the bullet. So we need to look at if the player has fired, basically. Okay, that's kind of what we're looking at in this next bit. So in order to do that, we need to be getting the pressed keys. So just as we did earlier, so pressed keys equals pygame dot key dot get underscore pressed. So that is going to return the pressed keys. And if the pressed keys is equal to the spacebar and weight is greater than 30, we're going to allow our user to fire, basically. This weight variable here, just looking at this one here, we don't want them just to be able to unlimitedly fire. We're going to increment this wait variable every frame, so they can only fire once every 30 frames, so about once a second basically. If you want them to be able to fire more, you can decrease this number. If you want to be able to fire less and make it more difficult for the user, you can increase that number. Okay. So if those two things have been met there, we are going to basically create a bullet list, and we are going to append to that bullet list a new bullet. Okay, so we're going to add that in there. Yeah, sorry, so we've got a bullet list here, sorry, so we are going to append, we're going to add a bullet to that bullet list. And we're going to reset the wait time to 0. And the reason we do it in a list is because there could be more than one bullet on the screen at a time, so we want to be able to draw every bullet in that bullet list. So we're going to do that now. So we're going to do for x in bullet list. Sorry, we want to be able to move every bullet in that bullet list. If x.rect.top is less than 2, we're going to remove it from the list. So bullet list dot remove x. So if the bullet list is ever at the top of the screen, we remove it from the list. For every other item in the bullet list, so that would be every other x, because every x is an item in the bullet list. For every x, we want to move them and we want to draw them. So x.draw, and we're going to draw them to the display surface. So from this we can move all of our bullets in our bullet list, and we can draw all of our bullets in our bullet lists at the position given in move. So with that done, we now want to look at the enemies. Okay, so we've done all this cool code which is going to let them move left and right and up and down, but we haven't called any of it yet. So we're going to do the enemy group movement. Okay, so the enemy group movement, we are going to move the whole group. So we're going to do for each enemy in enemy group. You might be thinking, why don't I just use a list for this, put them all in a list? Why have I then got overcomplicated and use a group as well? It means that I can do a couple of different things with this group of enemies that I would be unable to do if they were in a list. But you'll see that as we go through this in a second. So we're going to, every enemy in the enemy group, we're going to move them. And we are going to move them by, so we're going to say, so we have to say what arguments we give it, so false and 0 and speed. And then we're going to draw them as well, enemy.draw, and we're going to draw them to the display surface. So that's just the move. We made this move method earlier, we made this draw method earlier for our enemy. You can go up and have a look at those and see how they work in more detail. So now we're going to look here. So if the enemy's rect.left, so for each enemy in the enemy group, if their left hand part of their rectangle is ever less than 0, which means the left part of the rectangle has touched the left side of the screen, we want to call our enemy.right method, which is going to pull them down and then start them moving right. And then we're going to do exactly the same for the other side of the screen. So if the right is ever greater than the screen width, we want to move them left. So they go to the screen width and then we move them left. And then finally, if the enemy's rectangle reaches the bottom of the screen, that's when we get our game over. So if the enemy.rect.bottom is ever greater than the screen height. We are going to fill the screen with red. So display surface dot fill it with red. We are going to draw our game over. So display surface dot blit, and it's the game over font, and we're going to draw that position 200 and 250. You may want to tweak these, have a little look around, and then our final score as well, we're going to dot blit, we're going to draw that score text 215 by 300, and then we're going to update the display. Pygame.display.update. Now I've heard the way my game works is it waits 4 seconds and then reloads the whole game again. So instead of just crashing out, we kind of have a little bit of a loop here. So we are going to do time.sleep, and we're going to have that for 4 seconds. And then we are going to call the alien spawner .alien list. I'm going to empty that just in case there's anybody still in there. We are then going to call the enemy spawner, which is going to create that would actually create a new empty list. So we may not need that line of code. I'll leave it in for the time being. We'll muck around with that in a second. And then once again, we're going to paste all of those enemies in the enemy group. And then finally, we're just going to reset all of these enemies. So reset enemy. So I made a little method in the enemy class which resets all the X and Y positions. So in enemy group, we're going to reset all of their positions. Lily. And that resets all of the enemies, and then we set the score to 0 and we set the speed back to 1. Okay, so that part there will actually restart the game for us. Okay, so the next thing we're going to have a little look at is doing the bullet list again. So this is again for bullet in bullet list. So if I ever collide with a sprite, so for every bullet which is in the bullet list, if Pygame sprite collide, collide like that, and we're looking at the enemy and the bullet list. So if any of the enemies are ever touching anything which is in the bullet list, we are going to kill that enemy. We're going to remove the bullet from the bullet list. So bullet list dot remove. I'm going to remove whatever bullet is that's just collided with them, and we're going to increase our score by 10. Score by 10 there. Okay, and that is the final part, actually, like the mechanics of the game there. Last thing we're going to do here is we are going to just update. So make sure I'm in the right line here. Yeah. So that follow. Yeah, that should be it. So we're going to do Pygame dot display dot update. We're going to add one to the image reset. Oh, image reset. We're going to add one to the weight, and we're going to tick that clock.tick by whatever FPS we have set. And that is the last line of code for the main. So that's a fairly meaty thing. If you're having trouble with that, you can grab that off of the GitHub. Okay. So I've just written main, open close brackets here, which is going to call the main loop of the game, which is going to create all of our classes, which is going to get our game loop running. So moment of truth time now. There's always at least one error, isn't there? So let's have a little look here. Unexpected indent there. Yeah, so this block of code didn't need to be indented, so I'm going to highlight it all, dedent that region, and let's try that again now. And oh, I'll be impressed if that was the only error. Let's see if it works. So I've misspelt in line 150. Somebody probably saw that ages ago. So go back to line 150. There it is. Image. Right, let's try that again. Okay, so we've got a bit of an issue with this one here. That's self.x2. So I need a dot there. So dot width. I was missing that in the background. So rect.bg image.width should get us moving now. So it's gone through the background. So hopefully it loaded up the music okay. So hopefully we're nearly there. It's always a couple of errors. And Pygame.space.group doesn't have an attribute called space. So what am I trying to say there? Oh, sprite. Pygame.sprite.group. Right. So that was line 168. So let's keep going now. Oh, I've copied that a couple of times, so I would bet there's probably going to be another error come up from here. That same thing. Okay, we've loaded something now, so we're getting there closer. Here they are. Dot y1 and dot y2. Don't need those dots there. And then this should be sprite. If we remember rightly, because I just did that incorrectly. Okay, I wonder now if that is going to work. Oh, there's another one there. So if that enemy group one there, that should be sprite. So wherever we've got Pygame.space, basically if you also did Command and F, you'd be able to find it. So if you searched for the word space, you'd be able to then replace them with the word sprite for any of the ones which were incorrect. So let's run it. Fingers crossed, this is going to be the one. Pressed keys is not defined. I would guess I've written the word pressed key or something. There it is. Written the word pressed key, and then everywhere else I've looked at pressed keys, I think. Yeah, I've looked at pressed keys here. So that should be pressed keys in the player class there. We're getting there. Bullet list is not defined. So I forgot to write the word list after my bullet here. So this attribute here in the main, so in the main where we're looking at all of our attributes, that should be bullet list. Enemy.move takes 2 arguments, but 4 were given. So what's wrong with enemy.move? Okay, it is because an earlier version of this I had enemy move taking 3 different arguments, but actually we only need enemy.move to take the argument which is speed. So we're going to go to this part of it here in the main again, where we're looking at that enemy group. I'm going to change enemy.move just so it takes speed. Ah, it is, but our So all everybody's drawing, however, our sprites aren't moving. If we go up to the enemy class, you can see that where we did the dot move here, I should have done move underscore IP for move in place, but I didn't. There's just that move at the moment. So if you change those to underscore IP, moving. So there they are, they're moving now, and we are moving now as well. Hit the space bar. However, we're having an issue there with the space bar. So in our bullet class, just having a look at this now, this should actually, if we remember, this should be get underscore rect, because we're getting the rectangle of that surface. Okay, so we get the rectangle of that surface. Please now work. Interesting, I've hit an error there. Oh, this is just rect BG image like that, without the full stops, because the name of it's rect BG image. There's no full stops. Right. Let's try again. So that's in the background class. So hopefully now when those, so that was when the background was going back across the screen. It wasn't enjoying that at all. So why it's good testing it as we go in. Music's still working. So see our clouds are still going across the screen. I think they are repeating now, so that looks a bit better now. Yep, they're now repeating. There's a little bit of a pixel overlay there we can see, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not the end of the world. Maybe have a look at why that is. They've also moved forward, so they've moved faster, so we know that that event that we've programmed is working. And if I could just get these last two, there they are, they're all coming back. So we know that our game is working. So the last thing we're going to test is that if we get a game over, does it show the game over screen, does it repeat, and does it allow us to carry on playing. So I'm going to wait for these guys to get back to the bottom, and we will see that actually happening. So apologies for all the errors at the end there. It's quite a long piece of code, quite complicated, but hopefully you're able to follow along and actually troubleshoot that at the end. So that's good there. That's our game over screen. So hopefully 4 seconds time we should reload everything. Possibly, or not. No, it's not going to. So the reason it's not worked is it doesn't like alien spawner.alienspawner.list. Alien spawner. Enemy spawner. So that's right down the bottom. It's one of the last things we did in the main loop. So I'm just gonna, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna increase the speed just to do this final test. There they are, all going a lot faster now, overlapping a little bit because of the speed is so much faster. And when we get down to the bottom, 4 seconds time, we should repeat. There we go, and it actually sets the speed back to 0 as well. So I really hope you enjoyed that that little tutorial. Again, apologies for all the errors at the end, but it's a fairly sizable chunk of code. If you follow along, you'll be able to bug squash all of those little errors that come up. I'm sure that the majority of you kind of saw a lot of them as we was going through and kind of figured it out and changed things as you went through as well. But I really hope you enjoyed that, and come back in a couple of weeks' time and we'll have some more cool stuff for you. Okay, thanks a lot.